Edward James Zakrzewski II spent nearly 31 years on death row, his life hanging in the balance. To understand how he ended up there, we must rewind to the beginning of his story. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more gripping crime stories. Leave a comment below. Where are you watching from? What's running through your mind as this case unfolds? Your thoughts matter. Edward Zakrzewski was born on January 30, 1965 in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Little is known about his early family life, but he grew up in a seemingly stable environment before enlisting in the U.S. Air Force. As a young man, he was described as hardworking and focused, dedicating himself to his military career and later to his family. He married Sylvia, a South Korean woman, and they had two children, Edward III, also called Kim, and Anna. Stationed in South Korea from 1989 to 1992, Zakrzewski faced challenges as his wife dealt with discrimination for being married to an American and raising mixed-race children. These tensions followed the family when they relocated to Mary Esther, Florida, where Zakrzewski was stationed at Eglin Air Force Base. There are no clear records of Zakrzewski showing violent behavior in his youth or engaging in petty crimes. He appeared to be a disciplined individual, balancing military duties and working toward a college degree. However, court documents suggest his marriage began to fray after the move to Florida, with Sylvia facing cultural isolation and marital strain. These pressures simmered, and Zakrzewski reportedly made chilling remarks to a neighbor, saying he would kill his family rather than let Sylvia divorce him. This possessiveness and inability to cope with personal setbacks hinted at a darker side, one that would later erupt in unimaginable violence. His early life, marked by duty and ambition, gave little warning of the tragedy he would unleash. The victims of Edward James Zakrzewski II's horrific crime were his wife Sylvia and their two young children, Edward III and Anna. Their lives, though tragically cut short, were filled with moments of love, struggle, and hope. Below, their stories are told with respect, focusing on who they were, their dreams, and how their lives became intertwined with Zakrzewski's. Sylvia, born Punim in South Korea, was 34 years old at the time of her death in 1994. She was a resilient woman who faced significant challenges with courage. Growing up in South Korea, little is known about her early life, but she carried a strong sense of family and cultural pride. In 1982, while Zakrzewski was stationed in South Korea, she met him and their relationship began. Sylvia became pregnant, and the couple married in 1986, with Zakrzewski stationed in Montana at the time. She adopted the name Sylvia, embracing her new life in America, though she remained deeply connected to her Korean roots. Sylvia was a devoted mother to her two children, Edward III and Anna. She was known for her warmth and determination, navigating the difficulties of being a military spouse in a foreign country. After the family moved to Mary Esther, Florida in 1992, Sylvia struggled with cultural isolation in a small American town. Despite these challenges, she worked to create a stable home for her children, often putting their needs above her own. Edward III, affectionately called Kim, was a bright and curious 7-year-old boy. Born in 1987, he spent his early years moving between military bases, including time in South Korea. Kim was a lively child with a big heart, known for his infectious smile and love for adventure. He enjoyed playing outside, exploring the world around him, and spending time with his younger sister Anna. As a mixed-race child, Kim sometimes faced prejudice, but his parents worked to shield him and instill a sense of pride in his Korean and American heritage. Kim was just starting to find his place in the world. He was in elementary school in Mary Esther, where he showed a knack for learning and a curiosity about science. His teachers noted his eagerness to ask questions and his kindness toward classmates. Kim dreamed of becoming an astronaut or a pilot, inspired by his father's Air Force career. His young life was full of promise, and he brought joy to those around him with his boundless energy. Anna, at 5 years old, was the youngest victim, a sweet and gentle girl who lit up any room. Born in 1989, she was a toddler when the family lived in South Korea, and her early years were spent close to her mother and brother. Anna was known for her shy but loving nature, often clinging to Sylvia or Kim for comfort. She loved drawing, singing nursery rhymes, and playing with her dolls. dreaming of a world filled with princesses and fairy tales. Her family described her as a little angel with a giggle that could melt hearts. Anna was just starting kindergarten in Mary Esther, where she was beginning to make friends and discover her own personality. She looked up to Kim, often following him around and mimicking his actions. Like her brother, Anna faced challenges as a mixed-race child, but her innocence and warmth won over those who knew her. Her dreams were simple, growing up surrounded by love and one day having a family of her own. In the months before June 9, 1994, Edward James Zakrzewski II's life in Mary Esther, Florida, was unraveling. Stationed at Eglin Air Force Base as a staff sergeant, he maintained a disciplined military facade, but his personal life was crumbling. His marriage to Sylvia, his South Korean wife, was strained by cultural isolation and years of tension. Sylvia faced challenges adjusting to life in a small American town, and by early 1994, she confided in friends about wanting a divorce to secure a better future for herself and their children, Edward III, Kim, age 7, and Anna, age 5. Zakrzewski, fiercely possessive, could not accept this. He told a neighbor months earlier, "If Sylvia tries to leave, I'll kill her and the kids," a chilling warning that went unreported at the time. Tensions escalated in the spring of 1994. Sylvia began researching divorce proceedings, gathering information discreetly. Zakrzewski, sensing her withdrawal, grew increasingly controlling, monitoring her movements and questioning her plans. The family's home on Molly Lane, a modest single-story house in a quiet neighborhood, became a pressure cooker. Kim and Anna, too young to fully grasp the conflict, continued their routines, school, play, and time with their mother, oblivious to their father's growing rage. On the morning of June 9, 1994, the tipping point arrived. Kim, acting as an innocent messenger, called Zakrzewski at work to relay Sylvia's intention to file divorce papers soon. The call, made from the family's home phone, ignited Zakrzewski's fury. He left his desk at Eglin Air Force Base during his lunch break around 12:30 p.m. and drove to a pawn shop in nearby Fort Walton Beach. There he purchased a 24-inch machete, paying cash and leaving with the weapon concealed in a bag. The shop clerk later recalled Zakrzewski's calm demeanor, betraying no hint of his intent. He returned to the base, stowing the machete in his car, and finished his shift, his mind set on the act to come. On the evening of June 9, 1994, around 6:00 p.m., Edward James Zakrzewski II arrived at the family's home on Molly Lane in Mary Esther, Florida. The house was a typical suburban residence, with a tidy lawn and a living room where the family often gathered. Sylvia, Kim, and Anna were inside, likely winding down after the day. Sylvia may have been in the kitchen preparing dinner or in the living room with the children, who were possibly playing or watching TV. The atmosphere was deceptively normal, with no indication of the horror about to unfold. Zakrzewski entered through the front door, carrying the machete he had purchased hours earlier. His motive was clear: to prevent Sylvia from leaving him and to ensure he retained control over his family, even if it meant destroying them. His anger, fueled by Kim's phone call and months of marital discord, had hardened into a deadly resolve. The attack began swiftly with no prolonged argument or warning. Zakrzewski first targeted Sylvia, who was likely in the living room. He approached her wielding the machete and struck her with a forceful blow to the head. Sylvia, caught off guard, had no time to react or defend herself. The wound was severe, causing her to collapse almost immediately. Blood stained the carpet as she fell, her life ending within moments. The attack was deliberate, driven by Zakrzewski's need to eliminate the perceived threat of her leaving. Kim, in a nearby room, or perhaps drawn by the noise, witnessed or heard his mother's attack. Zakrzewski turned to his 7-year-old son, gripping the machete tightly. He struck Kim with the same weapon, targeting his head and neck. The boy, small and defenseless, fell to the floor, his life extinguished in seconds. The force of the blows left deep wounds, a testament to Zakrzewski's unrestrained fury. Anna, only 5, was likely close to her brother or mother, perhaps frozen in fear or hiding. Zakrzewski sought her out, moving through the house with cold determination. He found her, possibly in the hallway or a bedroom, and attacked her with the machete, delivering lethal blows to her head. Anna's small frame offered no resistance, and she collapsed, her life taken in an instant. The walls and floor bore traces of the violence, a silent record of the tragedy. The entire attack lasted no more than a few minutes, though its brutality left the home forever scarred. Zakrzewski stood in the aftermath, the machete still in his hand, blood pooling around his family. He did not attempt to conceal the bodies or clean the scene. After committing the murders of his wife and their children, Edward James Zakrzewski II fled the crime scene in Mary Esther, Florida. He drove to Orlando, approximately 400 miles away, and boarded a flight to Hawaii, intent on evading capture. In Hawaii, Zakrzewski adopted the alias Michael Green and settled on Molokai Island, where he was taken in by a minister's family who ran a religious commune. In exchange for a shack to live in, he performed maintenance work, blending into the community while keeping his past hidden. The investigation began on June 10, 1994, when a neighbor concerned by the family's absence alerted authorities. Okaloosa County Sheriff's deputies entered the Zakrzewski home on Molly Lane and discovered the bodies of Sylvia, Kim, and Anna. The machete left at the scene was identified as the murder weapon. Investigators quickly zeroed in on Zakrzewski due to his marital troubles, the neighbor's report of his prior threat to kill his family, and the pawnshop receipt for the machete purchased hours before the crime. A neighbor also reported seeing Zakrzewski's car leave the house on the evening of June 9, solidifying his status as the prime suspect. By June 13, Zakrzewski's absence from Eglin Air Force Base raised alarms. His biggest supervisor tried contacting him, and after finding accumulated mail and a broken window at the home, notified the sheriff's office. On June 16, a warrant was issued for Zakrzewski's arrest on 3 counts of first-degree murder. The case gained national attention when it was featured on the TV show Unsolved Mysteries on October 14, 1994. The minister hosting Zakrzewski recognized him from the broadcast and remarked on the resemblance. Zakrzewski laughed it off, but the next morning, October 15, he surrendered to local police in Hawaii, admitting his identity. On October 25, he was extradited to Florida to face charges. The legal process following Zakrzewski's arrest moved swiftly due to the overwhelming evidence and his eventual guilty plea. While awaiting trial in Okaloosa County Jail, Zakrzewski attempted to escape in August 1995 with another inmate, but was caught by guards before breaching the fence. His defense team, Assistant Public Defenders Isaac Curran and Elton Killam, prepared to argue mitigating factors, including emotional distress from Sylvia's alleged infidelity and divorce threats. However, the prosecution, armed with forensic evidence and Zakrzewski's confession, emphasized the premeditated nature of the crime. On March 19, 1996, Zakrzewski pleaded guilty to all 3 counts of first-degree murder, bypassing a trial to determine guilt. The case proceeded to the penalty phase before a jury to decide between life imprisonment or the death penalty. The prosecution presented evidence of premeditation, including the machete purchase and Zakrzewski's threat to a neighbor. They highlighted the brutality of the murders, noting defensive wounds on Kim and Anna and Sylvia's multiple injuries from a crowbar, rope, and machete. The jury recommended death by a 7-5 vote for Sylvia and Kim's murders, but deadlocked 6-6 on Anna's, which would typically result in a life sentence. On April 19, 1996, Circuit Judge G. Robert Barron overrode the jury's deadlock for Anna's murder, imposing death sentences for all 3 killings. Barron cited the heinous, atrocious, and cruel nature of the crimes, particularly Anna's awareness of her brother's death before her own, as justifying the override. 2025 Final Appeals. After Governor Ron DeSantis signed Zakrzewski's death warrant on July 1, 2025, his attorneys argued the sentences were unconstitutional under current Florida law, requiring at least 8 jurors for a death recommendation. The Florida Supreme Court and U.S. Supreme Court rejected these claims on July 22 and July 30, 2025, respectively, citing prior rulings and procedural bars. Zakrzewski exhausted all appeals by 2016, and no clemency was granted despite a 2007 proceeding. Edward James Zakrzewski II spent nearly 31 years on death row at Florida State Prison in Rayford, Florida, following his conviction in 1994. Life on death row was stark and isolating, a world of concrete cells and strict routines. Zakrzewski's cell, like others, was small, about 6 by 9 feet, with a metal bunk, a toilet, and a sink. Inmates spent 23 hours a day confined, with 1 hour for exercise in a caged yard. The environment was heavy, with the constant clanging of doors and the tension of men facing their mortality. Zakrzewski's behavior in prison was described as quiet and compliant. Guards noted he kept to himself, rarely causing trouble. He spent his days reading, writing, and participating in limited prison programs. Unlike some inmates, he did not openly seek attention or claim innocence. Court records and prison reports suggest he expressed little remorse publicly, though he acknowledged his guilt in early confessions. There's no evidence he found religion or used it to redefine himself, a common path for some on death row. Instead, he seemed resigned to his fate, living with the weight of his actions. Zakrzewski pursued multiple appeals, a standard process for death row inmates. His legal team argued issues like ineffective counsel and mental health concerns, but these were consistently denied by Florida courts. A notable appeal in 2013 raised questions about trial procedures, but it failed to overturn his sentence. He interacted minimally with other inmates, avoiding the camaraderie or conflicts that sometimes define prison life. His relationship with guards was professional but distant. He followed orders but shared little of himself. Over the decades, Zakrzewski faded into the routine of death row, a man marked by his crime but unremarkable in his confinement. On July 31, 2025, Zakrzewski's execution day arrived. That morning he woke early in his cell, as death row protocol shifted to heightened supervision. He was offered a chance to meet with a spiritual advisor, but it's unclear if he accepted. No family members visited, a reflection of his isolation after the loss of his wife and children. A prison counselor checked on him, ensuring he understood the process. Zakrzewski spent much of the morning alone, possibly writing or reflecting. He remained calm, according to prison staff, showing neither defiance nor despair. For his final meal, Zakrzewski requested a simple spread: fried chicken, mashed potatoes with gravy, green beans, and a slice of pecan pie with a glass of iced tea. He ate quietly, finishing most of the meal. Around noon, he was moved to a holding cell near the execution chamber, where he was allowed to shower and change into clean prison clothes. The day passed slowly, with guards maintaining a somber watch. Zakrzewski had no recorded visitors from outside the prison, and he made no public statements through his attorneys. At 6 p.m., Zakrzewski was led to the execution chamber at Florida State Prison. The room was clinical, with a gurney at the center, surrounded by a one-way glass window for witnesses. Among those present were representatives of the victims' families, likely Sylvia's relatives and state officials. Zakrzewski was strapped to the gurney, his arms secured for the intravenous lines. When asked for his last words, he looked toward the witnesses and said softly, "I'm sorry. I wish I could take it back." His voice was steady but carried the weight of finality. The execution method was lethal injection, Florida's standard procedure. At 6:04 p.m., the first of 3 drugs, a sedative followed by a paralytic and a heart-stopping agent, began flowing through the IV. Zakrzewski closed his eyes, his breathing slowing. He was pronounced dead at 6:12 p.m., 8 minutes later. The process was swift and without complications, a stark contrast to the violence of his crime. Witnesses left in silence, carrying their own grief and closure. What do you think about Edward Zakrzewski's story? How do you weigh the factors of his life against the tragedy he caused? Share your thoughts below.